at Root Source, one of our favorite teachers is Rabbi Elan Adler. And we caught up with him here in Jerusalem at a conference, and I asked him if he might step out for a few minutes so we could talk a little bit about one or two of the lessons that has impacted me, that he's taught out of his class materials. So come on over, Rabbi.
That's good. Well, thank you for your lovely introduction. I appreciate it.
So first, tell us about the class that you teach.
Yeah. So the class that I teach on Root Source is called Pirkei Avot, which literally means the chapters of the fathers, and it's a collection of 6 chapters worth of, I guess you would say, lessons, moral teachings, ethics. These are not so much laws, which you find a lot in the Talmud. This happens to be one piece of the Talmud that only concentrates upon lessons in life, lessons for living. These are, as I mentioned, these are great rabbis who kind of step away from the legal system of Judaism and have very weighty and very significant things to teach about life, how to live it, how to be moral, how to be upstanding. Some people say that originally Pirkei Avot, or the chapters of the fathers, was really meant basically for judges and people who would go in front of judges. But then the whole lesson was expanded to, this is not really just for people who are in court systems or whatever. These are great lessons for life, for the common, average, everyday person. And so it happens to be a favorite teaching of mine. And in Pirkei Avot, in these 6 chapters, you find, I would guess, close to 150, give or take, different lessons and different teachings. And so you mentioned that there were 1 or 2 that really impacted you, and I'd be anxious to hear about that.
So yes, now I've been going through your lessons over time, but there's a few that I had touched on recently that were related to government.
Yes.
And I thought it was so interesting that these fathers who date back from like the 70, some of them as early as the 70 elders with Moses, many coming later, you can explain that. But some of them were talking about the relationship of what it's like to step into governmental service, and then some of the, and another aspect of how we who are not in government should relate to those that are.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you could give a sense of some of those teachings.
Okay, sure. So let me give you this, if you want to take a look at it, which is at number 3 on the English side. And I will quote you directly from chapter 2, lesson 3 of Pirkei Avot. And I'll read it first in Hebrew, and then I'll do that in English. It says here in Hebrew, Havu zehirin barashut. Be wary in your dealings with the ruling powers. Be careful, it would say. She'ein mekarvin lo la'adam. The only reason that they want to bring you as the common citizen closer to them is letzorech atzman, is really for their own limited parochial purposes. So what does that mean? It kind of says a little bit more about that. It says, Nirin ke'ohavin, they seem to you, the average citizen, people in power, or people you want to put in power, they seem to you as people who appear as friends. They want to be your close friend. They want your friendship. When do they want that? Bishat hana'atan. When it's to their own personal advantage, they want everybody among the citizenry to think of them as their own personal friend. I'll help you. I'll do things for you. I'll help you get things done. If you have any needs, personal or otherwise, you come to me. I'm the elected official. I love you. I appreciate you, etc. But, says this teaching, this Mishnah, Ve'ein omdim lo la'adam. However, they do not stand with you bishat dachako. In your citizen, if you're a citizen, in your hour of need, all that they express to you about wanting you, liking you, appreciating you, all of that might go down the drain, because when you're really in an hour of need, when you really need them, want them, desire them, you need their help, their guidance, their support, they are not there for you. So it's a very interesting teaching. And basically it says that you, in Hebrew there's a two-word phrase, which Ronald Reagan kind of co-opted in one of his speeches about the Soviet Union. The two-word phrase in Hebrew is chabdehu v'chashdehu. It almost sounds like they rhyme. What it really means is respect and suspect. And I think Ronald Reagan, I don't remember the exact terminology that he had. Trust but verify. Trust but verify. Basically what this Mishnah is saying, it's saying that you have to be careful with how you deal with people in public office. What does it mean to be careful? It doesn't mean don't deal with them at all, because there are going to be times where you must deal with people in public office, and there are going to be times where you actually need them. But I think what this teaching is saying is that don't over invest in telling them perhaps the confidences of the Jewish community or your own confidence in whatever your life is. Don't so invest in them and in their power, because when you really need them, they may not be there because they're onto another group that maybe has more allegiance to him than you do. And it's also saying, but it's not saying it out loud, the implicit in this teaching is that it's better to rely on God than to rely on princes. And this is a direct quote from King David's Psalms.
So I have a question for you,
Yeah.
Rabbi. We can read the words of the Pirkei Avot
Yes.
and get a basic message. When you've taught this in your class,
Yes.
you've looked back to the personages of who said it, and can you say any? Can you give us any part of that context?
Sure.
For why this particular person
Yes.
should be so esteemed, and why he said in saying what he says?
Yes, it's a great question because, as you know, as our viewers know and our learners know, there's always the text, what we're actually studying, and then there's the context regarding what was this said. So that's a very key question. So this was a teaching taught by Rabban Gamliel. He was a great rabbi, a great sage, very honored, respected. We still study his works to this day, Rabban Gamliel. But Rabban Gamliel was the individual who said this. He was the son of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, was the compiler of all the Mishnahs, all of the oral laws, of which this teaching is one. It's one of the oral laws. So Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, why did he say this? Because his own father, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who is buried here in the land of Israel, Rabbi Judah the Prince had very, very close connections with the Roman government, and not just with the government, but with the top of the pyramid of the Roman government at that time, whose name was the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. And they had a very close connection. They talked very often.
One of the most famous Roman emperors.
Sure.
One of the most esteemed Roman emperors in the entire history.
In the entire Marcus Aurelius. Did he call him Mark? I don't know. I have no idea. In any case, they had a very close relationship. They often spoke together. The emperor wanted the guidance from Rabbi Judah the Prince. He wanted advice. They had a very kind of an intimate relationship, which is unusual for a person like Rabbi Judah the Prince to have with the emperor. As you said beautifully, Bob, he was the at that time. So what happened? So then the emperor is no longer the emperor. And before you know it, the Jewish community, even though it should have gotten special consideration from the Roman emperor because of the relationship he had with Rabbi Judah the Prince, who is the father of the one who taught this lesson, after the death of the Roman emperor, there was no special consideration given to the Jewish people. As a matter of fact, it kind of went downhill from there. So the son of Rabbi Judah the Prince remembers what happened with his father. Tight, great relationship, but they needed the allegiance of a new crowd of people in Rome or here, and before you know it, that whole special relationship dissolved. And it's exactly what he teaches. They are there for you in their time of need, but in your time of need, they're not there for you and they disappear. By the way, This has a couple of other precedents as well. Joseph, we're starting to read in the weekly Torah portion in synagogues across the world and perhaps other locations. We're starting to read now about the Joseph narrative, which will take us all the way to the end of the book of Genesis. Joseph saved Egypt. He saved Egypt by his dreams, by planning, by knowing what to do. He knew that there was 7 years of famine coming up, and he had the genius to know how do you prepare for that. And you have to do this and you have to do that. He saved, no question about it. He saved not only the economy, but the people and the civilization of Egypt at the time. What happens in the beginning of the next book of the Torah, in the book of Exodus? It says, "And there arose a king in Egypt who did not know Joseph." So what does that mean? He didn't know of him? Joseph was not recorded in the annals of Egyptian history. He was the one that saved the entire country. So our commentators say, maybe he never heard of him. Maybe he was by then a footnote and nobody even considered who Joseph was and the great thing that he did to save the country. Rashi, the French commentator from the late 1100s or so, Rashi said he made himself as though he didn't know Joseph. That he knew of Joseph. He understood who he was. He understood his critical importance to Egypt, but he kind of made like he didn't know, which means he basically wanted to forget all about it, what this Jew did to save the Egyptian people. So that's another kind of a situation. And I'll just mention one more if we have a half a moment. There was a great rabbi named Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. And the Abarbanel is a commentary that is still used today to study the weekly Torah portion. He was in charge of the royal treasury, this Rabbi Abarbanel, the royal treasury of Ferdinand and Isabella in Spain in the late 1400s. It was because of his acumen that they were able to amass the finances to finance the rebuilding of Spain after having it been taken back from Muslim domination. So Rabbi Don Yitzchak Abarbanel was a huge figure at the time. He made it possible to take back Spain from the Muslims at that time. And what happened, we all know, in 1492, not only did Columbus sail the ocean blue, as the old poem has it, but in 1492, Spain expelled every Jew. And this is what happened, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. Right after the heyday of the Jewish community in Spain, what they did, how much they contributed to Spain, to the cultural life, the intellectual life, financial life, whatever. They were major contributors. And then at the end of the 1400s, in 1492, even though Don Yitzchak Abarbanel was a huge influence and financed that whole ability of Spain to take the country back, what happened to the Jews? Not only they didn't bother them, they expelled them. So we see that this kind of a situation occurs again and again. But I would say that the most important word of this teaching is, it says, Hevu Zehirin. And the word Zehirin means be careful when you deal with people in government. Be careful when you deal with authorities. Not that you shouldn't, because there are times you have to. You're a citizen of the country. You have to deal with the people who run the country. I know for myself in my rabbinic career in Baltimore and in Stamford, Connecticut, we were always dealing with the mayor. We were dealing with the governor. This issue, that issue. How many times did I go with several students from our schools and go light Hanukkah candles? Like now, this is the Hanukkah season. We went to light Hanukkah candles in the office of the governor, in the office of the mayor. So, of course, we dealt with them very often. You have to deal with them to deal on issues of mutual importance, etc. But the Mishnah teaches, be careful. Be careful. And I think, to me, that's the most important word. Just be careful, respect and suspect. And to me, too, by the way, this is not just one of your favorites. To me, this is also a very, very favorite teaching. And it runs in tandem with a teaching a little bit further in chapter 2, where it tells us that whatever we do, we should do l'shem shamayim, which is Hebrew for whatever we do, we should do it for the sake of heaven. So sometimes we might make mistakes. We might overindulge ourselves with the authorities. Sometimes we may go too far and say too much and put our own people in jeopardy sometimes. But at the same time, whatever you do for the sake of heaven, God willing, it will be blessed. It will have a good fruition, and we should all be blessed every time we do things for the sake of God.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yeah.
According to this teaching, are the Jewish people encouraged to stay out of government where possible? Or maybe said another way, how does this phrase about doing for the sake of heaven, what does it inform for those who might feel a personal call to step into government?
Yes. So I think this teaching addresses your question by saying that when Jewish people run for any kind of an office, and many people do. In America, the most famous one of the Jewish community was Senator Joseph Lieberman, who became a senator of Connecticut, where I lived in Stamford. He actually grew up in the synagogue where I served as one of the rabbis, Joe Lieberman. And then he became a vice presidential candidate along with Al Gore. And I remember the thinking at that time was that for an Orthodox Jew, which Joe Lieberman is, for an Orthodox Jew to be in such very, very high office, it's going to bring out torrents of anti-Semitism. He will be like the antenna that will have people express all kinds of anti-Semitic thoughts and pejoratives. Oh, there's a Jew in government. Well, there goes the government. All kinds of things were predicted. I'm happy to say from all the things that I followed, and I read a lot at that time when he was nominated as a vice president, all the way until they lost the election, I don't remember hearing a shred of any kind of an anti-Semitic thought or pejorative remarks about him or the Jewish people. And I think it has to do with his own very ethical style and ethical personality. So if you want to go into government, and apparently, if I remember correctly, years ago there were times where the Catholic Church did not allow reverends or priests to be in the government. There was one, Father Robert Drinan in Massachusetts from the 4th District, who became a congressperson and was called back by the Vatican when they said there is to be no more priests to be running for any kind of an official government position. But what did Joe Lieberman do? He engendered good feelings about religion, about God, etc. And so the teaching would say, if you feel that calling, like you said, if you want to go into government because you feel it can be helpful to the people, can be helpful to the Jewish people, just do it knowing that you are under the watchful eye not only of the people, but even more important, you're under the watchful eye of God. So if you're going to go in there, behave and do things in a way that will bring honor and glory to God. And if you feel like you can't do that, my personal advice, step away. Don't get involved. You can take the whole Jewish people and have them flush down the drain if you are going to enter government and be an embarrassment to the Jewish people and be an embarrassment to God. So, whatever you do, if you feel like you want to give that way, just remember that there's an eye that watches, there's an ear that hears, and everything is written. That's another teaching we find in the Pirkei Avot Ethics of the Fathers. So just remember who really put you there, if that's what you really want to do. Who really got you there, if that's what you really want to do. And always remember that God is above, and do things and behave in a way that brings honor and glory to heaven.
Thank you so much for that.
It's my pleasure.
I'm not going to end it just yet,
okay,
because I want to surprise you with one question that I don't think you're expecting, but I want to take it the other direction.
Okay.
You know, we think of political office as being very public, very high,
yes,
and noted.
Right.
And so let's take it to the other extreme. Let's talk about washing dishes in the kitchen of the church, or serving, but serving in ways that aren't going to be so publicly noticed.
Yes.
Does this message of Pirkei Avot apply in such cases?
Honestly, I haven't seen that interpretation, and I looked through many different kind of interpretations. But it's easy to go from this teaching to exactly what you say. And I'll give you a quote from a very prominent prayer that is said every Shabbat morning, every Saturday morning in the synagogue, while the Torah is not yet put back in the ark. And any prayer that's said while the Torah scroll is still out, or being held by somebody, or it's on the reading table, is a very elevated kind of a prayer, because the Torah is there and it's in a sense listening to what's being said, if it had ears, and it raises the level of sanctity of whatever's being done around the Torah, as long as it's still out and hasn't been put back in the ark. So every Shabbat morning, every Jewish holiday morning, we have a special prayer that asks God, and I'll say it in Hebrew and then I'll translate it, V'chol mi she'oskim b'tzorchei tzibur be'emunah. We ask God to take note and to appreciate and to continue giving strength and desire to all those people who serve the public be'emunah. And right before this, it talks about the people who set up the prayer books. It talks about people who make some kind of snacks for the wayfarer, for people who had to come or walk very, very far to the synagogue. It talked about people who make sure that the lights are on for the prayers. And it kind of specifies very kinds of what we would call minute but big. These are big details, because without these tiny details, nobody could pray. If it's dark, you can't look in your prayer book. If you don't have a prayer book, it's very hard to pray. So this prayer asks God to take note of the people who do the very detailed, often, as you said, behind the scenes work. And what do we ask God to do? All those people who do this kind of work, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, may the Holy One, blessed be He, Yeshalem Scharam. May He please give them or grant them their due reward. That's the way it's put. May He grant them their due reward. So you would say, here in Israel, many times on a Shabbat after a service, there are all kinds of things put out on the table. A blessing is made over the wine, and there are plates of pretzels, bambas, all kind of snacks. And there are people who do that. They volunteer their time. So you'd say, wow, somebody put out a plate of pretzels. Big deal. Wow, big applause. Isn't that fabulous? Gee, I don't see the confetti yet. I don't hear any, fireworks going off. I mean, I just put that. It looks like such a tiny little thing. And yet when you see people grabbing at the pretzels and grabbing at the bambas and grabbing at the potato chips and grabbing at the barekas, whatever, you see that it engenders a feeling of camaraderie and friendship and congregation and togetherness and unity. And that little plate of pretzels all helped. It was an ingredient, and it came from the heart. And it looks like a little thing, but actually a very, very big thing. So I'll just mention in this idea, Bob, you've been on flights from either America to here. I don't know if you've counted them. I don't know if you've counted how many flights. There's a lot.
Yes,
a lot of flights. So there's a little envelope in the seat pocket in front of you where they make an announcement. Any of you that have change, they're not asking for bills. Although one time I put in my electric bill, they did not appreciate it. Anyway, they say if anybody has a small pocket change, please put it in the envelope. And the envelope will be collected before the flight lands. But they make the following phrase. They say in Hebrew, but I'll say it in English, it's small change that makes a huge difference. So I put my few coins in the envelope. What is it going to get? A stick of gum for somebody? But all the envelopes together and all the other flights, and you put them all together, that makes a huge difference. So you're absolutely right. This teaching would well apply to individuals who not only are out there in the public eye, not only in the spotlight, but also those quiet, determined individuals who sacrifice of their time to do the seemingly little things, but we know that they're actually huge.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, all your listeners. I bless you, from the city of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. I bless you. We're very close to the Temple Mount, Har Habayit in Hebrew. I bless all of you not only to enjoy all the teachings of Root Source, but also to come and be with us here in Jerusalem, in the land of Israel, and be blessed by God in His holy place.